Hey guys, welcome back to another video in our week on theories of everyday life. Uh, what we're going to be dealing with this week is a theorist who was a symbolic interactionist, but kind of branched off into a particular version of symbolic interaction that's called dramaturgy. It's a uh, very simple theory to understand because it's basically the metaphor is that all the world is a stage and that we're actors on it. So the drama part of dramaturgy refers to the theater. And the idea is that in order to avoid embarrassment, we present a particular version of ourselves, that we create this idealized self, and then we act according to that. That's basically what you've got going in this video. There are a bunch of nuances, though, and details that we need to get into. The first of which is the theorist who came up with this. The guy's name is Irving Goffman. Now, last time I made the point that symbolic interactionism is the big theory that you need to get out of this week, and that's true. But Irving Goffman is the most famous theorist from this week. His name, in terms of sociologists that you need to know in the 20th century, at least once you get to the middle of the 20th century, once you get past people like George Herbert Mead and Georg Simmel, he might be the most famous. So Irving Goffman, and he's really easy to remember because he's got this kind of one thing, this dramaturgy stuff. What we need to do is get into this. Okay, so symbolic interactionism makes the argument, we're going to branch off because Goffman was a symbolic interactionist. We're going to branch off of symbolic interactionism to get started on this. Symbolic interactionism makes the argument that, people are going through their lives making meaning and acting on it. But Bloomer was also wanted to make sure that we focused on the fact that people don't just walk into particular situations and then the parameters of that situation are the only things that motivate them. He said we have purposes. So we go through our lives from situation to situation making meaning. But there's this kind of through line of how I want my life to be with regard to relationships, careers, whatever. Goffman does not focus on that stuff. He doesn't say that it doesn't exist, but what he says is, yes, people have purposes, but in any particular situation, you may or may not be acting on those purposes. So if I'm at the grocery store waiting in the checkout line, Goffman would say, my career plans and my relationship with my family are not motivational factors for me. But I want to look like a competent human being. I want to appear, confident, cool, or at least just competent in my interactions with whoever I have to interact with, even if it's just the person who is working the register. He says purposes, yes, they sometimes apply, but presenting oneself always does. And so for that reason, it's worth just understanding, let's sever off those purposes and just look at this particular interaction that we're having. What are the dynamics of it? Okay, so Goffman says these are the dynamics of it. We want to present a certain sense of ourself. This idea of presentation of self actually comes from his doctoral dissertation. I'm pretty sure it's his doctoral dissertation, certainly his first book, The Presentation of Self in Everyday Life. And he says that, so we walk into situations, we want people to, treat us a certain way, which means we present a certain cleaned up version of ourselves. We want them to think of us as, at a minimum, competent, worthy people. But here's the problem. In any particular moment, you can screw up. So in these videos, you guys have seen me stumble over my words a bunch of times. My phone has rung before. You've probably heard my dogs in the background. All of those are aspects of a performance that can go wrong and that can lead an audience to reject the version of self that the person is presenting. So if we were actually in a classroom and my phone rings, all of a sudden there is this flaw in my performance, and that Goffman would say, then therefore I feel embarrassed. And embarrassment is not like the only motivation that people have, but it is a motivation. People want to avoid being embarrassed, and so they act in ways to kind of prevent the audience from having a reason to reject them, to have a reason to not accept their performance. So here's how it goes. I am getting ready to be on stage. Let's say it's an interaction where I am going to be teaching you guys, but I'm going to be in a classroom. That classroom is where the performance is going to take place, which means I've got a whole portion of my day that happens before that. Everything before that happens backstage. So this theater metaphor, he's going to be very serious about. He says, okay, so backstage is one, where we prepare our performance. So you guys are not going to see these aspects of it, but I'm going to be like cramming, because I don't know any of this stuff. So I'm like cramming to learn all of this information that I'm about to tell you, and I have to learn it well enough that you guys aren't going to suspect that he's really not any more intelligent than we are. He just happened to cram for this stuff before he went in and lectured us. Backstage is where that happens, and it's in addition to where I prepare, it's also where I leave secrets that I don't want you to know. So I don't want you to know that I crammed all that information. So I'm not going to come into class and be like, wow, I knew nothing about this, but you guys are going to be really interested. But also aspects of me that I just might want to conceal. The fact that I have nothing but Jimi Hendrix tattoos from here to here is something I don't want you guys to know about, and so therefore there's long sleeves on, and I don't allude to that aspect of my life. I don't allude to the aspect of my life that I used to be in a gang. I don't allude to the aspect of my life that, whatever. None of that stuff's true. But the point is that there are all kinds of things that we hide, and where we hide them is backstage. All right, that's what you got. So that takes care of backstage. Now we move into the performance. So I step front stage, and front stage, I have got 3 resources that I can use to accomplish the goal of presenting the self, a competent, intelligent professor that I want you to buy. I have 3 resources. The first resource is the setting, the physical place. So in order to make you guys feel like I'm in control of the situation, I will put my stuff up on the podium, and I will use the width of the classroom, and I'll march back and forth, and I am owning that space, but I'm using it, right? I'm using it to convey to you the fact that I am authoritative, I'm in control, I'm confident. So that's resource number 1, the physical place, the setting. Resources 2 and 3 are contained in the term personal front. Okay, so I've got the physical setting, and then I've got, which is 1, and then resources 2 and 3 are the personal front. The personal front is made up of my appearance and my manner. Appearance means exactly what you think. So I dress without showing my big Hendrix tattoo, and I dress in collared shirts, and I wear these glasses that I don't really need, but they make me look kind of more intelligent than I really am. All of that is appearance stuff, and well, that's pretty self-explanatory. The third thing, second part of personal front, which is the third resource that we can use to present a certain self that we hope people will buy, is my manner. So the way I conduct myself is what manner basically means. The fact that I use these hand gestures to kind of convey enthusiasm. What else? The tone of my voice, that type of thing. Manner's fairly self-explanatory as well. Okay, so that's what we've got. Setting, appearance, and manner. Appearance and manner being contained in Goffman's term personal front. Goffman is a symbolic interactionist, so he's saying what I'm doing is I'm conveying all these meanings for you to interpret, and I am creating them based on my understanding of what those meanings will hopefully have for you. But kind of an interesting point, he does say that personal fronts tend to become institutionalized. So in our next week's stuff, we will talk about the micro-macro connection. Micro meaning the like individuals interacting, macro meaning social structure. And he says there are these patterned ways of being a professor. So like I didn't invent collared shirts and looking like a nerd. Or the way that I act is basically ripped off from a philosophy professor I had, 30, 40 years ago. So that idea of personal fronts being institutionalized. Sorry, this one's going a little bit long. I think I am no, I've got one big point left to make, which is that the idea of team. Okay, so the one place that his idea of the theater metaphor kind of breaks down, or it doesn't break down, that's not the right way of thinking about it. The place where he differs from it, he doesn't reify this metaphor. He says, okay, so yes, this is what's happening. There's backstage, there's front stage, we act out this particular version of the self. But the audience is different. Yes, the audience, just like an audience at the theater, can accept or reject a performance. But he says the audience has a vested interest in the performance going well. And he refers to the audience and the actor as a team. Not the most super creative term, but I mean it's really self-explanatory. He says that they work together most of the time, not all the time, but most of the time they work together in order for the performance to be carried off, because for most people, watching somebody else be embarrassed is an uncomfortable experience. So the audience wants for the most part, not all the time, but mostly wants the performance to go off without a hitch. So the audience often acts to save the performance. They will fake interest and attention in it, because if they do that, then it won't be obvious to other people that it's boring. So if I'm giving you a lecture and you're really bored, you'll kind of oftentimes keep eye contact with me or nod along to encourage me. You'll avoid going, oh my God, how long is it going to go? All kinds of things that are reasonable reactions to being bored, right? And he also says that audiences will often give special consideration to neophyte performers. So if you find out, oh, it's my first day ever in a classroom, you may be likely to cut me a little bit of slack. But the team can disturb the performance, and which is why actors, don't usually count on the team being there. The team usually helps, but actors are attuned to the need that they have to control the audience. So if I do screw up, I come up with some lie to tell you about. Oh, like my phone rang during class, and it's like, oh, I had to leave it on because, I don't know what, somebody's going to have an operation or something like that. And you tell a story that makes you look good so that the self that you are presenting doesn't end up falling apart, because it's a fragile thing, these presentations. Okay. To conclude, and hopefully get you in under 15 minutes, Goffman's theory is often referred to as impression management, because I am trying to manage the impression you have of me. I am trying to manipulate you, manage your impression. It is easy to take Goffman and say, well, everybody is just a cynical performer. And Goffman doesn't really think that. He, first of all, remember, says, yes, purposes still do happen. It's not that you just walk around manipulating people. It's just you want to not be embarrassed. And so this happens a lot. Most people are, even though not everything in my life is surface level, I am concerned about the surface level in most of my interactions. It's not that that's all I am, but that is a fairly important element of my life. And Goffman says, sociology hasn't paid that much attention to it. However, despite that surfacey stuff, he also says that he hints at the fact that there is something deeper. This idea of embarrassment, that was our jumping off point. and everything since then has been surface manipulation. But let's pay attention to that. Embarrassment is a really uncomfortable emotion, and it hints at the fact that there is this deeper level. In our next video, we're going to study a sociologist named Arlie Hochschild, or Hochschild, I'm not totally sure how to pronounce her last name, but she jumped off from Goffman, and instead of coming up with a theory of impression management, she comes up with a theory that I personally think is one of the cooler ones that we learned this entire semester, called emotion management. So we will deal with that because we're over 15 minutes. I'll get into emotion management in the next video.